The courtroom at Providence Superior Court fell silent when Sarah Mitchell walked through the doors. 38 years old, wearing a simple navy dress that hung loosely on her frame, she'd lost 23 pounds since her diagnosis. She moved slowly, one hand gripping her husband David's arm for support. A pale blue headscarf covered what chemotherapy had taken, and despite her best efforts with makeup, the exhaustion was visible in every line of her face. Across the aisle sat Julian Cross, 33, CEO and founder of Velocity Tech, a startup valued at $300 million that promised to revolutionize workplace productivity through AI-driven optimization. He wore a black turtleneck, the uniform of tech disruptors, $400 John Varvatos jeans, and limited edition Nike sneakers that cost $850. His Apple Watch, the 1999 titanium edition, buzzed constantly. He kept glancing at it, typing responses, as if the proceedings were merely an inconvenient interruption to his world-changing work. Behind him sat 5 attorneys from Morrison & Klein, a firm that specialized in defending Silicon Valley companies against discrimination claims. Their lead counsel, Amanda Morrison, commanded $1,250 per hour and had a reputation for aggressive tactics that bordered on cruel. But they were in Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom now. Before we dive into what happened in that courtroom, if you believe in justice and want to support a new channel dedicated to sharing these powerful stories, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Every subscription helps us bring more of Judge Caprio's wisdom to light. Judge Caprio entered, and everyone rose. At 79, with 37 years on the bench, he'd seen corporate cruelty before. But the case file before him, case No. 2124-8829, had kept him up the previous night, reading and rereading the details. What he'd found had disturbed him deeply. "This court is now in session," he said quietly. Case number 2024-CV8829, Sarah Mitchell versus Velocity Tech, Inc., with a counterclaim filed by Velocity Tech against Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Mitchell alleges wrongful termination. Velocity Tech claims damages for what they characterize as toxic victim culture that damaged company morale and valuation. Amanda Morrison stood immediately. "Your Honor, my client Julian Cross built Velocity Tech from nothing into a company worth $300 million in just 4 years. They're disrupting the productivity software industry, employing 200 highly skilled workers, and are on track to IPO next year. This lawsuit threatens not just my client, but the entire company and all those jobs." Ms. Mitchell was terminated for legitimate performance reasons after a documented pattern of missed deadlines and declining productivity. The timing of her termination near her cancer diagnosis was purely coincidental. Furthermore, her subsequent public complaints about the termination have created a toxic narrative that has damaged Velocity Tech's reputation, caused employee unrest, and potentially decreased the company's valuation by tens of millions of dollars. "We're seeking $2 million in compensatory damages." Judge Caprio's expression didn't change. "Ms. Morrison, you're asking me to believe that a company is suing a cancer patient for $2 million because she complained about being fired? We're protecting our business and our employees from false narratives that damage morale and productivity, Your Honor." "I see," Caprio said quietly. "Ms. Mitchell, tell me what happened." Sarah stood slowly, her voice soft but steady. "Your Honor, I worked at Velocity Tech for 3 years as a senior software engineer. I was one of the first 10 employees. I helped build the core AI engine that makes their entire platform work. My performance reviews were consistently excellent, exceeds expectations in every category. I was making $175,000 per year plus equity. On April 3rd of this year, I found a lump during a self-examination. On April 9th, my doctor confirmed it was breast cancer. Stage 2, aggressive, requiring immediate surgery and chemotherapy. I informed my manager, Derek Chen, that same day. I told him I'd need surgery in 3 weeks and would need to adjust my schedule for treatment, but that I could continue working throughout. Her voice cracked slightly. Derek seemed supportive. He said the company would stand by me. That was a Tuesday. On Thursday, April 11th, 2 days later, I was called into a meeting with Julian and HR Director Patricia Walsh. The meeting lasted 4 minutes. Julian said they were restructuring my role and that my position was being eliminated effective immediately. Did they give you severance? Caprio asked. 2 weeks. Your Honor, I'd worked there 3 years and helped build the company from 12 employees to 200. They gave me 2 weeks severance, and more importantly, my health insurance was terminated effective April 30th, 3 weeks before my surgery. The courtroom murmured with shock. I begged them to at least extend my insurance through the surgery. I offered to pay COBRA premiums up front. Julian said no. He said, and I quote, "We can't make special accommodations. It sets a bad precedent." Little did anyone know what the investigation would reveal. So you lost your job and your health insurance 3 weeks before cancer surgery? Caprio's voice was carefully controlled. Yes, Your Honor. My surgery was scheduled for May 2nd. It cost $87,000. We had to deplete our entire savings, max out credit cards, and borrow from my parents. My husband had to take a second job. We almost lost our house. Julian Cross sighed audibly, rolling his eyes. Judge Caprio saw it. Mr. Cross? Caprio said sharply. Is something troubling you? Julian straightened, his expression one of practiced patience dealing with someone who didn't understand disruption. Your Honor, with all respect, this is exactly the kind of emotional manipulation we're talking about. Yes, Ms. Mitchell's health situation is unfortunate, but Velocity Tech is a business, not a charity. We operate in an extremely competitive space where every day matters. We can't afford to keep employees who can't perform at the highest level. She had cancer, Caprio said slowly, which is tragic, but it's not my responsibility to subsidize her medical care. We gave her severance as required by law. She chose to make this a public issue, writing blog posts, giving interviews, painting us as villains. That damaged our brand, scared away investors, and created anxiety among our workforce. That has real financial impact, Your Honor. Hence our counterclaim. The courtroom erupted in shocked whispers. Sarah's husband David stood up, face red with anger, before her attorney pulled him back down. Let me understand something, Caprio said, his voice dangerously calm. You fired a woman 2 days after she told you she had cancer. Then, when she complained about losing her health insurance before major surgery, you sued her for $2 million? We terminated an employee for legitimate business reasons, Julian said coolly. The cancer is irrelevant. In tech, we move fast and we move forward. There's no room for weakness, survival of the fittest. That's how disruption works. Survival of the fittest, Caprio repeated. And Ms. Mitchell's cancer made her unfit? Your Honor, Morrison interjected. My client's personal views aside, the legal question is simple. Was the termination legitimate? We have documented performance issues. I'd like to see those documents, Caprio said. For the next 18 minutes, the courtroom reviewed personnel files. Sarah's performance reviews were indeed excellent. Until April, 2 days after her cancer diagnosis, a hastily written performance improvement plan appeared in her file, citing missed deadlines and attitude issues with no prior documentation. This performance plan, Caprio said slowly, was created 2 days after Ms. Mitchell disclosed her cancer diagnosis. Before that, every review was exemplary. Coincidental timing, Morrison said quickly. Was it? Caprio looked at Julian. Mr. Cross, had you discussed terminating Ms. Mitchell before April 9th? We're always evaluating talent, Julian said evasively. That's not what I asked. Had you specifically discussed terminating Sarah Mitchell before April 9th? Julian's jaw tightened. No. So the decision to fire her came after her disclosure? The decision came when her performance declined. 2 days after she told you she had cancer, you created a negative performance review where none existed before, then fired her. That's your testimony? If Judge Caprio's compassion moves you like it moves millions of others, show your support by subscribing to our channel. We're just starting out, and your subscription means everything. Your Honor? Morrison said desperately. Even if the timing seems unfortunate, employers have the right to terminate for business reasons. I'm not finished, Caprio said coldly. I'd like to hear from other witnesses. Derek Chen, Ms. Mitchell's former manager, is present. Mr. Chen, please approach. A man in his 40s, visibly uncomfortable, walked to the witness stand. He looked at Julian nervously. Mr. Chen, Caprio said gently, you were Ms. Mitchell's direct supervisor? Yes, Your Honor. Did you observe performance issues with Ms. Mitchell before April 9th? Derek hesitated, then quietly said, No, Your Honor. Did you create the performance improvement plan dated April 10th? No, Your Honor. That was created by HR and Julian after Sarah told us about her diagnosis. The courtroom exploded. Julian's face went red. Morrison was whispering urgently to her client. So the performance improvement plan, the justification for Ms. Mitchell's termination, was fabricated? Caprio's voice cut through the noise. I was told to sign it. I was told we needed documentation to protect the company legally. From what? From a discrimination lawsuit, Derek said miserably. I'm sorry, Sarah. I should have said no. I should have protected you. I was a coward. Sarah was crying silently. Her husband held her hand. Mr. Chen, Caprio continued, what happened in the termination meeting? Julian said we couldn't afford to have sick people bringing down team energy. He said Sarah's cancer would make her a drag on productivity, and that we needed A players who are healthy and hungry. He said keeping her would set a bad precedent, and that other employees might start thinking they're entitled to special treatment when they get sick. Did he specifically reference her cancer as a reason for termination? Yes, Your Honor, multiple times. He said, we're disrupting an industry. There's no room for weakness. She can't keep up anymore, and we can't wait around for her to get better. What the judge discovered next shocked everyone in the courtroom. I also have evidence from the company's internal Slack channels, Sarah's attorney said, standing. Your Honor, pursuant to discovery, we obtained Velocity Tech's internal communications. With your permission, I'd like to read some excerpts. Caprio nodded. On April 9th, the day Sarah disclosed her diagnosis, Julian wrote in the leadership Slack channel, Sarah just told me she has cancer. This is a problem. She's on the core AI team. We can't have her going through chemo during crunch time. Thoughts? The CTO, Michael Park, responded, Can we wait until after her surgery? Julian replied, No. Every day with a sick employee on the team is a morale drain. Plus, what if she dies? Then we've wasted months training someone who's gone, Cut the loss now. The courtroom gasped. Sarah put her head in her hands, sobbing. Multiple people in the gallery were crying or shouting. Order! Caprio banged his gavel. When silence fell, his face was pale with barely controlled fury. Did you write that, Mr. Cross? What if she dies? Cut the loss now. Julian's composure finally cracked. That was taken out of context. What context makes that acceptable? Your Honor, in business, you have to make hard decisions. You referred to a human being with cancer as a loss to cut. You calculated whether she might die and decided to fire her before wasting time on her. I was thinking about the company. The company? Caprio's voice rose. You have a $300 million valuation and 200 employees. Ms. Mitchell was making $175,000. You couldn't afford to keep her insured for a few months while she fought for her life? It's not about the money. Then what is it about? It's about culture. Julian stood, his voice rising. In tech, we move fast. We break things. We don't have time for weakness or excuses. Sarah's cancer would have dragged down the team. Other people would have had to pick up her slack. That's not fair to them. And her public complaints after termination hurt us. You fired a woman with cancer, and she complained about it, so you sued her for $2 million. She damaged our brand. She went to the media, wrote blog posts, painted us as heartless. Do you know how hard it is to recruit talent when you're labeled as the company that fired someone with cancer? We lost 3 key hires. Investors started asking questions. Our Series C funding got delayed. That has real financial impact. So you want her to pay $2 million because she told people you fired her when she had cancer, which you did. She made it sound worse than it was. How could it possibly sound worse? Caprio's voice was ice. You learned an employee had cancer, and 2 days later, you fired her and took away her health insurance 3 weeks before surgery. You wrote in an internal message that you were worried about wasting time if she died. Then, when she had the audacity to tell people what you'd done, you sued her. What part of that story needs to sound worse? Julian sat down, his face red, his carefully cultivated persona completely shattered. There's more, Your Honor, Sarah's attorney said. We interviewed 12 former Velocity Tech employees. 7 of them reported that Julian has a pattern of firing or demoting employees who experience serious health issues or family emergencies. 1 woman was fired 3 weeks after adopting a child because she wasn't maintaining the intensity. A man was demoted after his father's death because he seemed distracted. Another engineer was terminated after disclosing anxiety disorder. We also found that Velocity Tech systematically denies medical leave requests and discourages employees from using their legally mandated benefits. They call it maintaining the competitive edge. In reality, it's creating a culture where people are afraid to be human. Caprio shuffled through documents, his expression growing darker. Finally, he looked up. Mr. Cross, in my 37 years on this bench, I've seen corporate greed. I've seen cruelty. But rarely have I seen someone weaponize illness against an employee and then have the audacity to claim victimhood when called out. Here is my ruling. The courtroom held its breath. Velocity Tech's counterclaim is dismissed with prejudice. Not only is it without merit, it's an abuse of the legal system designed to intimidate and punish someone for exercising their right to free speech. On Ms. Mitchell's claim, I find that she was wrongfully terminated in direct violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Rhode Island Fair Employment Practices Act. The termination was motivated by her cancer diagnosis and by nothing else. The performance improvement plan was fabricated as legal cover after the fact. Velocity Tech is ordered to immediately reinstate Miss Mitchell to her former position with full back pay from the date of termination. $175,000 plus benefits for 7 months, totaling $101,117. Furthermore, Velocity Tech is ordered to pay Ms. Mitchell $2.5 million in compensatory and punitive damages. This covers her medical expenses, emotional distress, and serves as punishment for egregious discriminatory conduct. Additionally, Velocity Tech must provide Ms. Mitchell with lifetime health insurance coverage through their corporate plan, regardless of her employment status. This is to remedy the harm caused by terminating her coverage before surgery. Julian started to stand, but Morrison pulled him back down. "I'm not finished," Caprio said. "The Rhode Island Department of Labor will conduct a full investigation of Velocity Tech's employment practices. Any evidence of systematic discrimination will result in additional penalties. Finally, I'm imposing a $5 million fine on Velocity Tech, payable to the Rhode Island Workers' Rights Fund. This is for the pattern of abuse documented by former employees and for the unconscionable decision to sue a cancer patient for speaking the truth." He leaned forward, his voice hard. "Mr. Cross, you talk about disruption, about moving fast and breaking things, but you forgot something. You can't break people. People aren't things to optimize or eliminate when they're inconvenient. You created a culture where illness is weakness, where being human is a liability, where a cancer diagnosis makes someone disposable. That's not innovation. That's not disruption. That's cruelty dressed up in startup language. Sarah Mitchell dedicated 3 years to building your company. She helped create the technology that made your $300 million valuation possible. And when she got sick, something that could happen to anyone, including you threw her away. You calculated whether she'd die and decided to cut your losses. Then, when she told people what you'd done, you sued her. You tried to silence her with a $2 million lawsuit, hoping she'd be too sick or too scared or too broke to fight back." His voice rose. "Money can buy technology. It can buy disruption. It can buy 800 Metaferro sneakers and the appearance of being a visionary, but it cannot buy basic human decency, and it cannot buy your way out of the consequences when you treat people as disposable resources. You wanted to move fast and break things. Well, you broke Sarah Mitchell's life. You broke her financially, emotionally, physically, and today, the courtroom, the great equalizer, is putting her back together and sending you the bill. Justice cannot have two standards, one for tech CEOs and one for everyone else. You don't get a pass on employment law because you wear a black turtleneck and talk about disruption. The ADA applies to startups just as much as it applies to everyone else." The courtroom erupted in applause. Sarah was sobbing with relief, her husband holding her. Several people in the gallery, former Velocity Tech employees, were cheering. Julian sat motionless, his empire of invincibility shattered. If this story touched your heart, if you believe judges like Frank Caprio represent the best of our justice system, please support our new channel by subscribing and liking this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear that justice and compassion can coexist. Comment below with your city. Let's build a community that believes in fairness for all. The verdict sent shockwaves through Silicon Valley. Velocity Tech's Series C funding round collapsed. 3 board members resigned. Julian Cross was forced out as CEO 6 months later, replaced by someone who actually understood that employees are humans, not resources to optimize. The $2.5 million settlement, combined with her back pay, allowed Sarah to focus on her recovery without financial stress. She completed chemotherapy, had surgery, and as of today, is cancer-free. She didn't return to Velocity Tech, despite the court order. The company paid out her full equity stake, $420,000, as part of a mutual separation agreement. She now works as a consultant, helping tech companies build humane workplace cultures that don't sacrifice humanity for growth. The Rhode Island investigation found systematic violations at Velocity Tech. The company paid an additional $3.2 million in fines and was required to implement comprehensive employee protection policies. But perhaps the most important outcome was the conversation the case sparked. Tech workers across the country began sharing their stories of being fired while sick, of being penalized for family emergencies, of cultures that treated humanity as weakness. Sarah wrote a blog post titled, "Disruption Isn't an Excuse for Cruelty," that went viral, reaching 12 million people. It led to the Tech Workers' Bill of Rights movement, advocating for protections against health-based discrimination in the startup world. Judge Caprio, when asked about the harsh penalties, said simply, "Compassion isn't an exception to justice. It's the purpose." Mr. Cross wanted to build a company that moves fast and breaks things, but you cannot break people. And when you try, justice will hold you accountable. Sarah Mitchell is 40 now. Her hair grew back, though she sometimes still wears scarves on hard days. She speaks at conferences about workplace discrimination and employee rights. And she keeps the court judgment framed in her office, not as revenge, but as a reminder. A reminder that even when you're sick and scared and broke, even when a powerful corporation tries to crush you into silence, even when the system seems designed to protect the wealthy and powerful, sometimes justice prevails. Because Julian Cross was wrong about one thing. In the courtroom, there is no disruption. There is no moving fast and breaking things. There is only the law, applied equally to everyone, from the cancer patient fighting for her life to the CEO who thought his $300 million valuation made him untouchable. It didn't. And Sarah Mitchell, survivor, advocate, fighter, stands as proof that sometimes the courtroom really is the great equalizer. Sometimes humanity wins over corporate cruelty. Sometimes the vulnerable person defeats the powerful one, not because she was stronger, but because she was right. And in Judge Caprio's courtroom, that was enough.